Most women have been told that a man's love is strongest when he feels he is needed. And yet, the most intoxicating desire a man will ever feel is for the woman who has transcended the need for him altogether. She is no longer a fixture in his ego's architecture. She has become an untouchable presence, a silhouette he can't quite grasp, yet can never forget. In the quiet corridors of his mind, she moves like a shadow he cannot command. Once, she orbited his world, her warmth nourishing the parts of him that feared the cold. He mistook her presence for a guarantee, but something ancient in her, something primal and sacred, began to stir. It is the same force that calls rivers to carve valleys and trees to reach for the sun. It is the soul's revolt against dependence, the feminine instinct to reclaim her throne. This shift was not loud. It was not a dramatic storm, nor a sudden vanishing. It began in stillness. The kind of stillness that unsettles the unready heart. She started seeing herself through her own eyes, not through the lens of his approval. The mirror she once held up for him shattered, and the shards reflected a truth he had long avoided. His power over her was never real. It existed only as long as she consented to believe in it. Jung would have called this the process of individuation, the soul's journey toward wholeness. In her, the anima rose unchained. The inner marriage between her conscious self and her deep, instinctive knowing began to take root. She no longer fed on his validation because she had returned to the fountain of her own. And for a man whose ego thrived on being her anchor, this was a quiet apocalypse. You see, men are rarely taught how to love a woman who is free. Freedom confronts their shadow. It forces them to face the hollow places within themselves where control once stood. Her detachment does not scream rejection, it radiates sovereignty. She is not cold, she is simply untethered. And in that untethering, his hunger grows, because the masculine psyche is drawn to what it cannot contain. He begins to replay memories like rituals. The way her eyes once sought him out in a crowded room. The subtle lean of her body toward him when she laughed. The softness of her vulnerability, which once made him feel like a god. But now those gestures are ghosts, echoes of a past that no longer repeats itself. It is not that she has turned her back on love. No, she has simply risen above the transaction of need. She understands that love cannot be forged from lack. It must be an overflow. And so she gives from a place of fullness, not from a plea for return. This is what terrifies him, that she is capable of loving him deeply and yet surviving without him completely. You may not realize it yet, but the moment you stop needing him is the moment he starts questioning himself. The scaffolding of his worth, once supported by your reliance, now stands bare against the wind. His shadow whispers that he was never enough on his own, that her liberation is proof of his insufficiency. And yet, it is not about him at all. It is about the natural evolution of a woman who has come to know her own soul. This is where the alchemy happens, where loss transforms into longing, and longing into obsession. The same man who once felt secure in your availability now finds himself haunted by your absence. You did not slam the door, you simply walked into the garden of your own becoming, leaving it ajar. And in the quiet, he feels the pull of what he can no longer possess. The ancient Stoics understood this truth well, that what is most desired is often what cannot be owned. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "The things you think about determine the quality of your mind." And now his mind is saturated with you. The version of you who no longer waits, no longer asks, no longer bends to fit into the confines of his expectations. You have become an archetype in his psyche, the unattainable feminine, the wild queen, the one who dances just beyond the firelight. He will search for you in other faces, other bodies, other fleeting moments of connection. But every time, the truth will return. Nothing compares to the woman who once needed him and then learned she never truly did. This is not revenge. This is not a game. This is the quiet revolution of self-ownership. And it is here, in this sacred space, that the balance of power shifts. Not because you have taken something from him, but because you have reclaimed everything within yourself. When a woman withdraws her need for a man, she does not disappear. She transforms. And transformation has a gravity all its own. One that pulls at the deepest layers of the masculine psyche. She is no longer the girl who waited for his call, whose heartbeat quickened at the thought of his approval. Now her pulse aligns with something far older and more enduring, the rhythm of her own becoming. In Jungian terms, she has stepped out of the projection he once cast upon her. No longer is she the vessel for his anima, the feminine image his unconscious needed her to embody. She has returned those borrowed robes, leaving him face to face with the truth of his own unintegrated self. And for a man unprepared to meet his shadow, this is both a loss and a summons. He will feel it in ways he cannot articulate. In the silence between messages, in the absence of her emotional labor, once so freely given. In the way her gaze no longer clings to his, but drifts beyond, as though she is listening to something he cannot hear. That something is the call of her own soul, and it is louder than his voice could ever be. The male ego is built to equate need with value. If she needed him, it meant he was important. If she leaned on him, it proved he was strong. But now she stands without leaning, and in doing so, she forces him to reckon with the possibility that his worth must come from within, not from the scaffolding of her dependence. This is a confrontation many men spend lifetimes avoiding. And so he will try to pull her back into orbit, not always consciously, sometimes through the smallest gestures. A casual check-in, a reminder of a shared memory, a subtle offering of protection or provision. But beneath it all is the hope that she will need him again, that she will return to the space where his identity felt safe. Yet the woman who has crossed this threshold is not easily pulled backward. She has tasted the air of self-reliance, and it is sweeter than any comfort dependency ever gave her. She is not unkind, but she is unmoved by attempts to lure her into the old dance. Her compassion now includes herself, and in this expansion, the old patterns no longer fit. This does not mean she rejects love. On the contrary, her capacity for love is greater now than ever, but it is a love that does not bargain with her worth. She can choose to give, but she will not be compelled to. She can choose to stay, but she will not be bound by fear of loss. And that choice, that freedom, is precisely what makes her irresistible. You might think that a man, faced with such a woman, would simply let go. But the paradox is that her independence ignites a deeper, more primal pursuit. In the male psyche, what is scarce becomes sacred, and what is sacred demands devotion. He is drawn to her not because she has withheld herself, but because she is whole without him. In her wholeness, she awakens the part of him that longs to be whole too. This is where desire becomes both a mirror and a teacher. For him, the ache is not just for her body or her company, but for the reflection of his own unlived potential she now represents. For her, his pursuit is not a validation, but a reminder of how far she has come. She sees the man still circling her light, but she knows she is no longer the flame for him to feed on. She is the sun, self-sustaining, burning by her own fuel. Epictetus once wrote, "Freedom is the only worthy goal in life. It is won by disregarding things that lie beyond our control." She lives this now. She no longer tries to control his perception of her, nor does she bend to manage his comfort. She moves with the dignity of someone who knows that love, in its purest form, can only exist between equals, and equality is impossible when one lives in need and the other in power. For the man, this is both the wound and the cure. His longing for her becomes a doorway into himself. Should he choose to walk through it? But if he does not, he will remain on the threshold, forever haunted by the woman who no longer needed him. The one who taught him, without ever trying, that the most beautiful thing he could have given her was not his strength, but his respect for her freedom. There is a moment, quiet, almost imperceptible, when he realizes she no longer measures her life against his presence. It is in the way she laughs now, not to soften his mood but because joy has returned to her as its own guest. It is in the way her eyes scan the horizon without searching for him in it. This is the moment his desire begins to take root, not in affection, but in a kind of restless hunger. Jung would say that she has withdrawn her psychic energy from his unconscious, reclaiming projections that once kept them bound. Where he once saw her as the answer to his incompleteness, now he sees her as a separate universe, one he can visit but never own. And this distance does not weaken attraction, it makes it burn more brightly. Because the human psyche is drawn to mystery and she has become a mystery again. She has not built walls, she has grown forests. The path to her is not barred, but it is no longer straight. It twists and bends, requiring patience, humility, and the willingness to enter without a map. The man who once relied on shortcuts, a compliment here, a promise there, finds that they no longer open the gates. She has changed the locks, not out of malice, but out of a need to protect the sacredness of what she has found within. This shift is not something most men are prepared for. In the old dynamic, he was the sun around which her world revolved. Now he sees she has her own axis, her own seasons, her own constellations. And the more he reaches for her from a place of need, the further she drifts. Not because she resists love, but because she refuses to be pulled into an orbit that would cost her the ground she now stands on. You can see it in the subtle changes. The way she listens more to her own counsel than to the opinions of others. The way she chooses solitude without feeling lonely. The way her boundaries no longer tremble under pressure. These are not the signs of a woman building defenses. They are the signs of a woman who has nothing left to defend. She is no longer in the business of proving her worth because she has already seen it with her own eyes. And here lies the paradox that grips him. The very independence that frees her is the same force that chains his desire. He wants her precisely because she does not need him. He wants to be chosen by someone who could walk away without looking back. That choice would mean more than any devotion born of dependence. It would mean she loves him, not because she must, but because she decides to. The Stoics would remind us that we cannot possess what is not ours to command. Seneca wrote, "He who is brave is free." And in her bravery to stand alone, she has achieved the kind of freedom that makes ownership impossible. She can be with him, yes, but never under him. She can walk beside him, but never behind. This truth gnaws at the unprepared man. For in the old paradigm, his security came from her need. In the new one, his only claim to her is the quality of the man he becomes, and that is a heavier task than holding her through dependency. It demands self-mastery, shadow integration, and the courage to meet her as an equal. For the woman, this is the quiet liberation she never knew she needed. No longer is she tempted to shrink herself to make him feel large. No longer does she soften her voice to avoid his discomfort. She has learned that the cost of such concessions is too high. For it is not the loss of him she fears, but the loss of herself. And so she stands, luminous and untouchable, a reminder that true connection is not forged in the prison of need, but in the open fields of choice. He may approach, he may linger, he may even be welcomed, but he will know in every breath that her presence is a gift, never a given. There is a deep and ancient ache in the male heart when he senses that her life will go on, unshaken, without him. It is not simply jealousy or loss, it is the confrontation with a truth he has avoided, that she is complete and always was. His desire sharpens in the face of that truth, because the ego longs to conquer what stands beyond its reach. But here, the terrain is different. This is not a battle to be won, it is a presence to be met, and many men falter before they ever step forward. Her absence, even while she stands before him, is the most haunting thing of all. She is there, her voice, her laughter, her movements, yet there is no invisible tether binding her to him. He cannot feel the pull of her dependence, and so his instincts begin to circle, restless and uncertain. In her detachment, he sees a reflection of his own unfinished work, the hollow spaces he has never dared to fill from within. Jung spoke of the shadow not as an enemy, but as a treasure buried in darkness. To truly reach her now, he must descend into that darkness, not to drag her back, but to find himself. For the woman who no longer needs him has, in truth, become a guide. Not by teaching, not by leading, but simply by being the living embodiment of integration. She does not need him because she has learned to need herself, and in that self-reliance, she models the same wholeness he secretly craves. You may think her detachment makes her cold, but you would be wrong. Her warmth is still there. It is simply not conditional upon his presence. This is what unsettles him most. He cannot warm himself by her fire without first bringing his own flame. The days when he could take from her without giving of himself are gone. She will not return to the role of the endless well, pouring out water for a man who never learns to dig his own. And so, his longing becomes layered. He wants her body, yes, but more than that, he wants the light in her eyes when she looks at him as an equal. He wants to be the man she chooses, not out of habit, not out of fear, but out of desire. Yet to stand in that place, he must shed the safety of being needed. He must learn the risk of being wanted, and the humility to know that want can vanish at any time. For her, this is the evolution of love itself. It is no longer a transaction of survival, where her emotional labor buys his affection. It is an offering, freely given, with no chains attached. This is why she will no longer plead, no longer persuade, no longer contort herself into shapes that fit his expectations. The love she gives now is clean, stripped of bargaining, unclouded by fear. Marcus Aurelius wrote, "That which is not good for the hive cannot be good for the bee." She has learned that a love built on her diminishment cannot sustain either of them. Her strength is not a threat to love, it is the soil in which love can finally grow without rotting. If he cannot thrive in that soil, he will wither, and she will not uproot herself to save him. This is the quiet lesson her presence now offers, that the only way to hold her is to stop trying to hold her at all, to release the illusion of possession, and to meet her in the open. Two sovereign beings choosing, every day, to walk together, without shackles. Some men will find this terrifying, others will find it liberating, and those who are ready will discover that the woman who no longer needs them is the only woman they can truly love without fear. In the stillness she now carries, there is a kind of untouchable beauty. Not the beauty that begs for admiration, but the kind that simply exists, unbothered by who sees it. This is what unnerves him most. Once, her attention flowed toward him like a steady stream, and he drank from it without question. Now it moves like a river through her own landscapes, nourishing the life she has built without his permission or approval. He is no longer the source. And in the male psyche, losing that place can feel like losing the self. Her detachment is not punishment. It is alignment. The hours she once spent mending his moods are now spent in her own creation. The energy she once invested in deciphering his silences now fuels her art, her work, her friendships, her body, her spirit. In this, she has done the most radical thing a woman can do in love. She has made herself the center of her own life. Jung understood this as the retraction of projection, the moment the anima or animus is no longer carried on another's shoulders, but integrated within. She has pulled back her essence from the pedestal on which he once stood and placed it back where it belongs, inside herself. She no longer seeks her reflection in his eyes because she has found it in her own. And now, when he looks at her, he sees something foreign, a woman who is familiar yet newly untouchable. This is why he can't stop wanting her. Desire, in its truest form, is not about ownership, it is about pursuit of the infinite. And she has become infinite to him. No longer defined by the contours of his world, she has expanded beyond it. He can chase her, but she will always be more than he can hold, because she no longer compresses herself to fit the container of his needs. The Stoics would tell him this is the nature of all things, that the more tightly you cling, the more swiftly they slip away. Epictetus wrote, "When you kiss your child, whisper to yourself, 'Tomorrow they may die.'" Not as a morbid curse, but as a reminder to cherish without grasping. If he could understand this, he might see that her lack of need is not a rejection, but an invitation to love her without trying to cage her. But most men are not ready for such love. It requires a stripping of the ego, a willingness to meet her as one who stands on his own ground. It demands that he cultivate the same self-sufficiency she has found, so that love becomes an exchange of abundance rather than a trade of deficits. Until he reaches that place, he will continue to circle her like a moth around a flame, drawn yet unready to live in the same fire. For her, the transformation is irreversible. Once a woman knows she can survive, even thrive, without the man she once thought she could not live without, she cannot unknow it. The fear that kept her small is gone. The hope that once kept her waiting has been replaced by choice. Love, if it comes now, is not an escape from herself, but a meeting within her fullness. And here is the truth that completes the arc. The woman who no longer needs him is not harder to love. She is easier. Easier because she asks nothing he cannot give freely. Easier because she will never demand he fill her emptiness, only that he bring his whole self to stand beside hers. But to the man who is used to being needed, this is the most disorienting love of all, because it strips him of the illusion that love can be held by chains. The final realization is his to face, that to be with her he must want her without needing her, that his desire must be a choice, not a hunger. And if he cannot meet her there, he will lose her. Not because she turns away, but because she keeps walking. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.